oldest records of humanity describe a world so strange that it seems impossible. We are told that the Maya, the greatest civilization in the ancient Americas, collapsed because of shifting climates, because of a drought. It is a comforting, mundane lie. But what if the silence around their ruined cities is a seal? The Mayan texts speak of a sudden, overwhelming descent of the gods, entities that demanded impossible amounts of blood. They did not starve. They fed the wrong gods. And the implications reach far beyond the jungles of Mesoamerica. This sudden, ravenous hunger matches perfectly with the ancient Book of Enoch, which states the Nephilim consumed all of humanity's resources and eventually turned on humans for food. If this story interests you, subscribe and hit the bell. We're just getting started. Archaeologists are constantly trying to explain the sheer scale of ritual sacrifice in Mesoamerica without fully succeeding. They categorize it as a cultural anomaly. But the text records with precision a supernatural extortion. The gods did not just ask for devotion, they demanded biological consumption. The Mayan elite were bleeding themselves and their captives dry to sustain a localized spiritual manifestation. They were feeding entities that could not sustain their own existence in this dimension without human essence. The idea carries an unsettling weight. This was not a religion of faith, it was a desperate transaction. A spiritual hostage situation where the entire civilization was repurposed into an industrial slaughterhouse for the unseen. Thousands of miles away and thousands of years earlier, the biblical watchers, the fallen angels, rebelled and created the Nephilim. The apocryphal text described these giants as consuming everything the earth produced until they began to devour mankind itself. The corruption was absolute, and God saw the horror. The Great Flood was not a natural disaster, it was a divine quarantine. It was the deliberate undoing of creation to wipe out an unnatural infection. But what if the floodwaters only drowned the physical bodies? What if the insatiable demonic spirits of the Nephilim survived, roaming the desolate places of the earth, waiting for a civilization arrogant enough to invite them back? The Mayans did exactly that. They unknowingly reopened the exact doors that had collapsed the pre-flood empires. Through their sophisticated astronomy and mathematics, they didn't just map the stars, they mapped the spiritual firmament. They found the cracks in the cosmic seal. When they began their blood rituals, the spirits of the Nephilim descended upon the Americas. They anchored themselves to the immense stone pyramids, mirroring the ziggurats of Babylon and the monolithic seals of the ancient world. The entities that plagued the pre-flood Middle East had found a new stronghold in the deep jungles. The slaughter escalated because the hunger of the fallen is endless. The sudden abandonment of the Mayan cities in the 9th century remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. The people just vanished, leaving their magnificent temples to the jungle. But the biblical narrative offers a terrifying alternative to drought. Whenever humanity aligns itself with the fallen host, divine judgment follows, without appeal, without exception. The collapse of the Maya was a localized divine intervention. It was a secondary, silent flood of destruction, not of water, but of sudden societal dissolution. The heavens intervened to shatter the Nephilim outpost before it could spread across the entire hemisphere. The cities weren't abandoned due to famine, they were evacuated in terror as God struck the altars. Look closely at the architecture of the ancient Americas, and you will see the same mathematical fingerprints found in Babylon. The step pyramids of Mesoamerica serve the exact same function as the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. They were not just tombs. They were constructed as spiritual antennas, elevated platforms designed to breach the boundary between the material world and the abyss. The Mayan priests were operating a dark technology. By pouring human life onto these altars, they were creating a localized rupture in reality, allowing the banished Nephilim spirits to briefly manifest and consume. The silence around this terrifying parallel is deafening. Separated by oceans and millennia, both cultures built the exact same machines to feed the exact same entities. The Mayan records speak of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god who descended from the sky. We treat this as folklore. But the Book of Enoch warns of the seraphim, angelic beings whose very name translates to burning ones or fiery serpents. The entity the Maya were communicating with was not a local myth. It was one of the fallen watchers attempting to establish a new dominion far from the Middle East. It demanded sacrifice because it was cut off from the divine source of life. It had to feed parasitically on humanity. The brutal rituals were not a misunderstanding of nature. They were a terrifyingly accurate understanding of how to sustain a fallen angel in physical space. This horrifying transaction could not last. Just as God flooded the earth to break the grip of the original Nephilim, he shattered the Mayan civilization to seal the Americas. The sudden, inexplicable collapse of their empire was a divine quarantine protocol. The skies were shut, the altars were abandoned, the entities were starved out and forced back into the spiritual wilderness. The jungle grew over the massive stone pyramids, acting as a natural seal over the spiritual radiation that still leaked from the stones. The Mayan people didn't all die, they scattered. They were forced to abandon the massive, blood-soaked engine of their society before it consumed the entire continent. But a seal is not a permanent solution. It is a temporary pause. The entities that the Maya fed are not dead. They are merely dormant, waiting in the desolate places. Today, millions of tourists visit these ancient sites every year, unknowingly walking across the exact geographic coordinates where the barrier between worlds was intentionally worn thin. Modern spiritual movements speak of connecting with ancient energies and honoring the old gods of the earth, but they do not understand what they are waking up. The idea carries an unsettling weight. The entities that demanded the blood of thousands are still listening, and the seals placed over the jungles are beginning to crack. We look at the ruined temples of the Maya and feel a sense of tragic wonder, believing we are safe in our modern, enlightened age. But the spiritual reality that broke the greatest empire of the Americas has not changed. As society once again turns away from divine order and romanticizes ancient paganism, we are unknowingly rebuilding the very altars that God had to destroy. The hunger of the Nephilim is eternal, and the ancient doors are being forced open once more. Subscribe now to find out what other secrets are about to emerge from the depths. And tell us in the comments, what do you think is waking up?